Before we dive into today's terrifying tale, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a spine-chilling story. Let's get into it. The Last Correspondence.
I never thought I'd be one of those people, scrolling through Tinder late at night, hoping to meet someone halfway decent. But there I was, swiping through endless profiles, tired of the same old routine. I had just moved to the city a few months ago, Denver, the mile-high city, but to me, it felt more like the lonely city. I didn't know many people, and my work-from-home job kept me isolated, so I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd meet someone online. Then I found Chris. His profile wasn't like the others. He didn't try too hard, wasn't overly flashy. His smile was genuine, his messages thoughtful. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were texting every day. He was charming, funny, and made me feel special. He seemed like the kind of guy you could trust. We bonded over simple things, our shared love of hiking, obscure movies, and a mutual distaste for pineapple on pizza. Still, there were little things that didn't quite add up. He was vague about his job, always saying something like, "I'm a bit of a jack of all trades," and when I asked about his family, he brushed it off with, "they're complicated." He never posted on social media either, which I found odd, but I chalked it up to him being private. Everyone has their quirks, right? After weeks of talking, Chris suggested we meet. But instead of a typical first date, coffee, drinks, he invited me over for dinner. He said he loved cooking and wanted to make me something special. I hesitated. Meeting someone from the internet at their house was a big step. My mom's voice echoed in my head, warning me about stranger danger, but I ignored it. Chris wasn't a stranger anymore. I felt like I knew him, and besides, I was tired of playing it safe. I needed to take a chance. So, I said yes. The day of the date, I was excited, nervous even. I spent too much time picking out an outfit, settling on a simple dress that felt casual but cute. As I drove to his house, my excitement grew. His texts were sweet, telling me how much he was looking forward to tonight, how he couldn't wait to finally meet me in person. I felt butterflies in my stomach. But when I turned onto Pine Street, something changed. The neighborhood wasn't what I expected. The houses were older, some of them run down, with overgrown lawns and broken fences. I double-checked the address. It was right, but the place didn't feel right. Chris had described his house as cozy, but what I pulled up to was far from that. The house looked abandoned. Paint was peeling from the walls, the windows were covered in grime, and the yard looked like no one had touched it in years. I sat in my car for a minute, staring at the house, a sinking feeling settling in my gut. Maybe I had the wrong address. I checked my phone again. Nope, this was the place. A message popped up from Chris. "I see you. Can't wait to meet you, beautiful." I glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed. Who was watching me? I didn't see anyone outside, but the message made my skin crawl. Maybe he was just excited, I told myself, but still, something felt off. I thought about turning around, heading home and coming up with an excuse later. But I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to be that girl who freaks out over nothing. So, I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and stepped out of the car. The moment I did, a chill ran down my spine. The air was heavy, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones, making you shiver even though it wasn't that cold outside. I walked up to the front door, my heart thudding in my chest. I knocked, but there was no answer. After a minute, I knocked again, harder this time, but still nothing. I checked my phone. Another message from Chris. "The door's open. Come on in." My stomach twisted. Why wasn't he coming to the door? Why did I have to go inside alone? Something wasn't right, but I ignored the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Maybe he was just finishing up dinner, or maybe he didn't hear the knock. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the door handle and pushed it open. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing nothing but darkness. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, heavier, colder. The smell hit me immediately, a musty, stale odor, like the place hadn't been lived in for years. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint glow from the streetlights outside. I expected to hear Chris's voice, maybe the clinking of dishes in the kitchen, but there was nothing. Just silence. "Chris." I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. I hesitated at the doorway, unsure of whether to take another step. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, get back in my car, and drive as far away as possible. But I didn't. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, that I was overreacting. Maybe Chris was in the back, or in the kitchen, setting things up. Maybe he hadn't heard me come in. Still, something didn't feel right. I took a few cautious steps forward, my shoes echoing on the wooden floor. The house looked worse on the inside. The walls were yellowed with age, the floorboards creaked underfoot, and there was an eerie quiet that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, like it was waiting for something to happen. As I ventured further inside, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I sent a quick text to Chris. Asterisk, "Hey, I'm here. Where are you?" Asterisk, I stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear, indicating he was typing. Nothing. That's when I heard it. A soft creak, like the sound of a floorboard shifting. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze in place, straining my ears to listen. It came from deeper in the house, somewhere past the hallway, maybe from the kitchen or the living room. For a second, I felt relieved. Maybe it was just Chris. He must have been in another room, and he'd heard me come in after all. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting a message from him, maybe something explaining why he hadn't answered the door. Instead, the message on my screen sent a wave of ice through my veins. Asterisk, "I see you." Asterisk. My breath caught in my throat, and I looked around, panicked. The hallway was empty, just a stretch of shadow and faded wallpaper leading into the darkness ahead. I checked behind me, but the front door was still ajar, letting in just enough light to illuminate the first few feet of the hallway. I was alone. Or at least I thought I was. The message, "I see you." Was this some kind of joke? Was he watching me from somewhere? My hand started to shake, and I typed back quickly. Asterisk, "Chris, where are you?" Asterisk, my mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Maybe he was messing with me, trying to be playful. But there was nothing playful about the feeling creeping up my spine. I stepped deeper into the house, glancing around nervously, searching for any sign of him. There was a doorway to the left, leading into what looked like a living room. The room was dark, with only the faintest hint of furniture visible in the shadows. A couch, a coffee table, everything covered in a layer of dust, like no one had touched them in years. My phone buzzed again. Asterisk, "Go to the kitchen." Asterisk. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. I hadn't told him where I was standing, yet he seemed to know. The panic that had been simmering inside me was starting to boil over. I could feel my hands trembling as I typed back. Asterisk, "What's going on? Why aren't you answering me?" Asterisk. But before I could even hit send, another message came through. Asterisk, "Kitchen." No. Asterisk. My blood ran cold. I looked toward the back of the house, where the kitchen should be. The creak I'd heard earlier suddenly felt a lot more ominous. The logical part of my brain kept telling me to leave, to get out of there, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, torn between fear and the gnawing curiosity that kept me walking further into the house. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see a faint light flickering inside. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and pushed the door open. The kitchen was in a state of disrepair, like the rest of the house. Cabinet doors hung off their hinges, and the counters were cluttered with old, dusty appliances. But what caught my attention wasn't the state of the kitchen. It was the small table in the center of the room. 2 place settings had been laid out, as if someone had been preparing for dinner. Candles burned low, casting an eerie glow over the scene. I stood there, my mind racing. Had Chris been here? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? But the thought didn't settle right. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I turned back toward the hallway, my heart pounding. I needed to leave. But as I took a step toward the door, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message made my blood freeze. My breath hitched in my throat as I stared at the message on my phone. Asterisk, "Don't leave." Asterisk, every instinct in me screamed to get out of that house, to run, but my body felt frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. I stood there in the dim kitchen, the soft flicker of candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dread, as if the house itself was closing in on me. I quickly spun around, my heart pounding so hard it was painful. The hallway stretched out behind me, dark and empty. Or at least, it looked empty. But someone had to be watching. Someone knew exactly where I was, what I was doing, and they were taunting me, enjoying my terror. I frantically checked my phone again. Maybe this was all some kind of sick joke, a twisted prank Chris had set up. But the messages, they didn't feel like a joke anymore. They felt calculated, like whoever was sending them was inside my head, manipulating every move I made. With trembling hands, I typed back, "What do you want?" No response. The silence was unbearable, like the house itself was waiting for something. I started backing out of the kitchen, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. I needed to leave. I headed down the hallway, my feet moving faster, trying to make it to the front door. As I approached, a horrible realization struck me. The door I had left slightly open when I came in was now shut. My stomach twisted into knots. I didn't remember closing it, and the eerie quiet made me feel like I was walking through a nightmare. I grabbed the door handle and yanked it hard. It didn't budge. Locked. Panic surged through me. I twisted and pulled at the handle with all my strength, but it was no use. The door wouldn't open. My mind raced. I hadn't locked the door. I hadn't even closed it. How could it be locked now? My phone buzzed in my hand again. I almost didn't want to look, terrified of what I'd see. But I forced myself to glance down at the screen. There's no way out. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. My fingers tightened around the phone as I frantically typed, "Why are you doing this?" Again, no response. I turned, looking over my shoulder, and the darkness of the house seemed to close in around me. Every creak, every distant thud of settling wood sounded like footsteps creeping toward me. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I could feel my throat tightening with the urge to scream. I ran back down the hallway, my eyes scanning for any other exit. Windows. There had to be a window I could climb through. But the house was dark, the windows dusty and clouded, with thick wooden frames that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. I tugged at one in the living room, but it didn't move. It was sealed shut. Desperation clawed at me. I didn't want to die here. I wasn't going to let some sick stranger trap me in this house. I searched the room for anything I could use to break the window, a chair, a lamp, something heavy, but my thoughts were scattered, my brain foggy with fear. Then, from behind me, I heard it, a soft thud, like something heavy being placed on the floor. It came from the kitchen I had just left. My heart seized in my chest. Someone was in the house with me. I wanted to run, to hide, to do anything to escape the creeping terror that was slowly tightening its grip around my neck. But I couldn't think straight. My legs felt weak, like I was wading through quicksand. My phone buzzed again. Reluctantly, I looked down. I'm waiting. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Who was doing this? What kind of twisted game was this? I backed up into the hallway, my eyes locked on the entrance to the kitchen. I expected to see someone step out at any moment, to hear footsteps coming toward me, but there was only the oppressive silence. Summoning what little courage I had left, I bolted toward the stairs. There had to be an upstairs window I could break, or maybe an attic where I could hide. Anything to get away from whoever, or whatever, was watching me. As I reached the stairs, the creaking behind me grew louder, like something was following me. But I didn't dare look back. I scrambled up the steps 2 at a time, my chest tight with panic. When I reached the top, I spotted a small bedroom to the right. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it with trembling hands. The room was barely furnished, just an old mattress on the floor and a cracked mirror hanging on the wall. But it felt safer than the rest of the house, like it might offer some sort of protection. I backed up against the far wall, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. Come upstairs. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Whoever was sending these texts, they knew exactly where I was. They were always one step ahead of me, like they were controlling every move I made. I could hear faint footsteps outside the door now, soft but deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the walls closing in around me. I wasn't alone anymore, and there was nowhere left to run. I pressed myself against the far wall, my heart hammering in my chest, eyes fixed on the door. The footsteps outside had stopped, but I knew whoever, or whatever, was just beyond it. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with fear. My hands were trembling as I gripped my phone, its cold screen the only source of light in the room. The message still burned on the screen, asterisk, come upstairs. Asterisk, they knew. They always knew. My mind raced, searching for any explanation. Was this some kind of sick game? Maybe Chris wasn't real at all. Maybe I'd been lured here by someone who had been watching me, studying me for weeks. The thought made my skin crawl. All those conversations, the late-night chats, the flirty banter, I'd thought I was connecting with someone. But now, it felt like I had walked straight into a trap. The door rattled suddenly, shaking me from my thoughts. My breath hitched in my throat, and I stared at the handle, expecting it to turn at any second. My phone buzzed again. Asterisk, I'm right outside. Asterisk, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I stared at the door, half expecting it to burst open, but it remained still. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My voice felt locked in my throat. I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped. My eyes darted around the room, desperate for some kind of escape. The window. I rushed to it, nearly tripping over the old mattress on the floor. The glass was dirty and smeared, but I could see enough to know it led to the roof. It was my only chance. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get it open. Finally, with a soft creak, the window slid upward. The cool night air hit my face like a splash of water, bringing a brief, fleeting moment of relief. I leaned out, looking down at the roof below. It was steep, but if I could just get down to the ground, I could make a run for it. But then, my phone buzzed again, freezing me in place. Asterisk, don't even think about it. Asterisk, I felt my blood turn to ice. Oh, how could they know? I spun around, my eyes frantically scanning the room for cameras, for anything that could be watching me. But there was nothing, just the cracked mirror and the decaying walls. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the room. It wasn't from the door. It came from behind the mirror. My breath stopped. The knock came again, louder this time, like someone, or something, was on the other side. I backed away, my heart slamming against my ribs as I watched the mirror. Then, slowly, impossibly, the glass began to fog up, as if someone was breathing on the other side. A faint outline of a handprint appeared, pressed against the inside of the mirror. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like I was frozen in place, watching as the handprint faded, only to be replaced by something far worse. A message. Written on the fogged-up glass, in what looked like smeared fingers, were the words, asterisk, too late. Asterisk. I stumbled backward, my phone slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The door behind me rattled violently, the handle twisting. This time, I knew it wasn't just a threat. Someone was coming in. I turned back to the window, panic surging through me. I scrambled to climb through, my legs dangling out the window as I tried to pull myself onto the roof. My hand slipped, and I felt myself almost fall, but somehow I managed to hold on. I could hear the door creak open behind me, slow and deliberate, but I didn't dare look back. With one final push, I tumbled out onto the roof, my knees scraping against the rough shingles. I scrambled to my feet, breathless and shaking. Below me, the yard stretched out in eerie silence, the shadows long and ominous under the dim moonlight. But then, my phone buzzed again, the sound cutting through the still night like a knife. I didn't want to look. I knew whatever I saw would only push me deeper into this nightmare. But I couldn't help it. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and glanced at the screen. Asterisk, I'm still watching you. Asterisk. My blood froze. I looked around frantically, scanning the yard below, the street beyond. There was no one there, no movement, just the empty stillness of the night. But I knew someone was out there, watching, waiting. The roof under my feet suddenly felt too exposed, too vulnerable. I had to move. I had to get out of here. But just as I took a step toward the edge of the roof, I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, like someone walking right toward me. I spun around, heart racing. There, standing in the window I had just climbed through, was a figure. I couldn't see his face, but I knew. I knew it was him, Chris, or whoever or whatever had been pretending to be him all this time. He didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes, the shadows swallowing him up like he was part of the night itself. My phone buzzed one last time, and with shaking hands, I looked down at the message. Asterisk, you can't run, Laura. I'm everywhere. Asterisk. Terror gripped me as I realized the truth. No matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, he would always be there. Watching. Waiting. And I had nowhere left to hide. I stood frozen on the roof, my legs trembling beneath me. The figure in the window was motionless, yet his presence suffocated me. My chest tightened as I gasped for air, my mind racing in a whirlwind of terror. My phone slipped from my hand, falling to the roof with a dull thud. I could no longer bear to look at it. Every message was a reminder of just how deep into this nightmare I'd fallen. For a long moment, neither of us moved. He stood there, framed in the window, an impossible, silent predator. He didn't need to chase me. He didn't need to move at all, because he already had me right where he wanted. I backed away, feeling the rough shingles scrape against my shoes as I inched toward the edge of the roof. I had to get down. I had to get out of here. But every step I took seemed pointless. His message echoed in my mind. Asterisk, I'm everywhere. Asterisk, was there even a way out? With trembling hands, I reached for the gutter at the edge of the roof and glanced down. The drop wasn't too far, but in my panic, it felt like miles. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, each beat a desperate plea to escape. Taking a deep breath, I swung my leg over the edge and began to lower myself. As my foot touched the ground, I immediately broke into a run. I didn't know where I was going, just away from that house, away from him. The cold night air stung my face as I sprinted through the overgrown yard and out onto the street. My footsteps echoed off the silent, abandoned houses around me. Everything felt wrong. The neighborhood, the silence. It was as if I'd stepped into another world, one where I didn't belong. But no matter how fast I ran, that sense of being watched never left me. I reached the corner of the street and glanced back, half expecting to see him following me. But there was nothing. The house stood still in the darkness, its windows empty and lifeless, as if no one had ever been there. As if I had imagined the entire thing. I collapsed onto a bench, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. For a brief, fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe it was over. Maybe I had escaped. But deep down, I knew better. My phone buzzed again. I stared at it, unwilling to pick it up. I didn't want to know what it said. But ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. Slowly, with shaking hands, I reached down and picked it up. Asterisk. You didn't really think it would be that easy, did you? Asterisk. A sob escaped my throat as I dropped the phone onto the pavement. I couldn't take this anymore. I couldn't keep running from something I couldn't even understand. My mind felt like it was unraveling, fraying at the edges as reality twisted into something I no longer recognized. I stood up, my legs weak beneath me, and began walking. I didn't know where I was going, just forward, away from that place. The streets were eerily quiet, no cars, no people, just the soft hum of distant streetlights. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, every sound amplified in the silence. My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't even have the energy to look. I kept walking, my thoughts spiraling. Was this how it ended? Would I spend the rest of my life being stalked, watched, tormented by someone who seemed to be everywhere? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, quick, purposeful steps, like someone was gaining on me. Panic surged through me again, and I broke into a sprint, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I ran down the empty street. My vision blurred with tears, but I didn't dare stop. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. I slowed down, glancing over my shoulder. There was no one there. The street was empty, the shadows still. But the fear was relentless, clawing at my insides. I wiped my tears away, trying to think clearly. I couldn't keep running like this. I needed help. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the endless stream of messages, and dialed 911. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the buttons. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the ringing, praying for someone, anyone, to answer. But all I heard was static. And then, a voice. Asterisk, Laura. Asterisk. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It wasn't the 911 operator. It was him. Asterisk, you can't escape me. Asterisk, his voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it cut through the static like a knife. Asterisk, I'm with you, Laura. Everywhere you go. I'll always be with you. Asterisk. I dropped the phone, backing away as if it had burned me. My pulse was racing, my skin crawling with fear. I looked around, desperate, searching for some sign of life, some way out of this nightmare. That's when I saw him. Standing under a streetlight, just a few yards away, was Chris. Or the man I had thought was Chris. His face was shadowed, but I recognized the outline. He was just standing there, watching me, unmoving, waiting. Terror surged through me like wildfire. I turned and ran again, not caring where I was going, just needing to get as far away as possible. My feet pounded against the pavement, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But no matter how fast I ran, I could feel him behind me. Always there, always watching. Finally, I stumbled, my legs giving out beneath me. I collapsed onto the ground, my body shaking, utterly exhausted. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't run. I was trapped, no matter where I went. I looked up, and there he was, standing over me now, close enough that I could see his face. But it wasn't his face. It was twisted, unnatural, as if the person I'd been talking to had never existed at all. "It's over," he whispered, his voice cold and final. And in that moment, I knew there was no escape. Not from him. Not from the nightmare I had willingly walked into. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was the sound of my phone buzzing one final time.
The meeting at the motel.
I was swiping through Tinder one evening when I came across Anna's profile. Her pictures were captivating, and her bio promised a mix of humor and adventure. We matched, and our conversations quickly turned from casual to deep. There was something about her that drew me in. Her laughter was infectious, and her stories were fascinating. It didn't take long for me to feel a connection, and after a few weeks of intense chatting, we decided it was time to meet in person. Anna suggested a discreet motel on the outskirts of town for our first meeting. At first, I was a bit hesitant, but she reassured me that it was a quiet, low-key place where we could talk privately without distractions. I agreed, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The day of our meeting arrived, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I drove to the motel, located on the edge of the city. The place was nothing special, a small, one-story building with a faded sign and neon lights that flickered intermittently. It was the kind of place you might pass by without a second thought. The lobby was dimly lit, with a musty smell that lingered in the air. The clerk, an older man with a tired expression, handed me the key to the room and gave me a curt nod. I couldn't help but notice the disinterested look in his eyes. I took the key and headed to the room, trying to shake off the strange sense of unease that was creeping over me. It was a long, narrow hallway with doors on either side. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the distant hum of a vending machine. I reached my room, unlocked the door, and stepped inside, hoping that this evening would be everything I'd imagined it to be. When Anna finally arrived, my nerves began to settle. She looked exactly like her pictures, beautiful, with an inviting smile. We greeted each other with an easy hug, and for a moment, everything felt right. She brought a bottle of wine and suggested we start with a drink before diving into conversation. We sat at the small table by the window, and Anna's presence was both soothing and exhilarating. Her laughter was genuine, and her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to our dreams and fears. But as the night wore on, something started to feel off. Anna's behavior began to shift. She would suddenly mention personal details about me, things I hadn't shared. At first, I thought maybe I had mentioned them in passing or she had picked up on subtle hints, but the details were too specific. She spoke about my childhood memories, my recent work troubles, and even personal anxieties I had never discussed. I tried to laugh it off, brushing it aside as her being overly observant or perceptive. But the more she talked, the more uncomfortable I felt. It was as if she knew me on a level that went beyond our conversations. When I asked her how she knew these things, she merely smiled and said she had a knack for reading people. Her response was dismissive, almost too calm. Her eyes, though, held a strange intensity that I couldn't quite place. The room seemed to grow colder, and the atmosphere became charged with an unsettling energy. I tried to shift the conversation to lighter topics, but Anna kept circling back to these unsettling personal details. My heart raced, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. This was not the evening I had envisioned. The evening took a turn for the worse when Anna's behavior became increasingly bizarre. She would drift off into unsettling silences, her gaze fixed on the walls as if she was seeing something I couldn't. When she snapped back into conversation, her responses felt disjointed, as if she was struggling to keep up with reality. I decided it was time to leave. The discomfort was now a palpable dread, and I could no longer ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I excused myself and headed towards the door, but to my shock, it was locked. I tried the door handle again, but it wouldn't budge. I frowned, thinking it might be a simple malfunction. But when I tried the other doors and windows in the room, I discovered they were all locked tight. Panic began to set in. I could hear the distant hum of the vending machine outside, but there was no other sound, no voices, no footsteps. I returned to Anna, my voice trembling as I confronted her. The doors, they're locked. I need to get out of here. Anna's smile was cold, almost predatory. You're not going anywhere, she said softly, her voice carrying an unsettling calmness. Her eyes, once warm, now looked like they were hiding something dark and sinister. I tried to force the door open, my hands shaking with fear. I felt trapped, my heart pounding in my chest. The room seemed to close in on me, and I could no longer deny that I was in grave danger. Desperation drove me to search for any possible way out. I grabbed a chair and tried to break a window, but the glass was too thick. I was trapped, my thoughts racing as I realized the gravity of my situation. Anna stood by, watching me with an eerie detachment, as if my fear was a source of amusement. It was clear that something far more sinister was at play here. Desperation had my pulse racing as I frantically searched for an escape. The motel, once just a dull, nondescript building, now felt like a labyrinth of dread. My mind raced as I thought about the stories I'd heard about this place. Stories of disappearances, rumors of people vanishing without a trace. While rummaging through the room, I stumbled upon an old, hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the closet. My hands were trembling as I pulled it open, revealing a stack of dusty newspapers. Among the yellowed pages, one article stood out, a chilling headline, "Motel linked to multiple disappearances." The article detailed a series of mysterious vanishings, all connected to this very motel. The pattern was unmistakable. People who had checked in had never checked out. Their last known locations were always linked to this motel, and the police had been unable to solve the cases. The article mentioned secret compartments and hidden rooms within the motel, designed to keep victims captive. As I read through the unsettling details, my fear escalated. It wasn't just a random place. I had walked straight into a trap designed to ensnare unsuspecting individuals. I glanced around the room, my mind reeling. Everything that was happening made horrific sense now. Anna wasn't just a person who had gone rogue. She was part of a system, a cog in a machine that preyed on people like me. The room felt suffocating, each shadow now a potential threat. The realization hit me hard. This motel was a carefully orchestrated trap, and I had been lured into it by someone who knew exactly how to play the game. My heart raced as I understood the full extent of the danger I was in. I needed to find a way out before it was too late, but the knowledge that others had suffered here only added to my growing terror. With the horrifying truth about the motel's past weighing heavily on me, I knew I had to act fast. Anna's chilling confession that I wasn't going anywhere was a stark reminder of how dire my situation had become. I had to escape, no matter what it took. I returned to the window, desperately trying to break it. My attempts were futile until, in a surge of panic-fueled strength, I managed to crack the glass. The opening was small, but it was enough to squeeze through. I felt a rush of hope as I clambered through, my body scraping against the rough edges. As I landed outside, the night air was cold and unwelcoming. I bolted towards the dim lights of the gas station I had seen on my way in. My heart pounded with every step, the sounds of my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. The motel loomed behind me, a dark silhouette against the sky. Reaching the gas station, I burst inside and frantically called the police. The clerk, a bewildered young man, looked at me with concern as I explained the situation. The officers arrived quickly, and I guided them back to the motel. My hands were still shaking as I tried to convey the urgency of the situation. The police conducted a thorough search of the motel, but Anna was nowhere to be found. They discovered the hidden compartments and the disturbing evidence I had found, but Anna had vanished without a trace. The authorities were able to confirm that the motel had been linked to several illegal activities and disappearances over the years. I was left with a haunting sense of dread, knowing that Anna and her accomplices were still out there. I had narrowly escaped a fate that many others hadn't, and the experience left me deeply scarred. The motel, now a dark chapter in my life, was a reminder of how close I had come to becoming just another statistic in its grisly history.
The missing profile.
I was new to the city, and the loneliness was starting to get to me. After a few weeks of feeling like a stranger in a new place, I decided to give Tinder a try. I wasn't expecting much, just a chance to meet new people and maybe make a friend or two. That's when I matched with Emily. Emily's profile caught my eye right away. She was stunning, with a smile that seemed to light up the screen. Her pictures showed her laughing in different places around the city, always with friends, always looking happy and alive. Our conversation started out light, but quickly delved into deeper topics. I found myself looking forward to every message she sent. She had this way of making everything seem interesting and exciting, and I couldn't wait to meet her in person. After a week of chatting, we finally decided to meet for dinner. We chose a cozy little restaurant downtown, one that had a reputation for its intimate atmosphere and excellent food. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness as I walked in that evening. Emily was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window. As soon as I saw her, my nerves calmed down. She looked even more beautiful in person. Our evening together was nothing short of perfect. We talked about everything under the sun, our favorite books, our dreams, and even our fears. We laughed a lot, and I felt like I was truly connecting with her. The way she looked at me, with those deep, expressive eyes, made me feel like I was the only person in the world. It was the kind of connection I'd only read about in novels. As the night went on, I couldn't help but feel that something about Emily was a little mysterious. She was evasive when I asked about her past, changing the subject or giving vague answers. But I pushed those thoughts aside. The night was too magical to let doubts creep in. When we finally said goodbye, I was already planning our next date in my head. Emily gave me a warm hug and promised she'd text me soon. I left the restaurant with a smile on my face, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had met someone special. The next morning, I woke up with the same excitement I'd felt the night before. I reached for my phone, eager to see a message from Emily. But when I opened Tinder, her profile was gone. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe she had deactivated her account for some reason. I tried searching for her on other social media platforms, but came up empty. It was as if she had vanished. I was puzzled, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had a good reason for disappearing from Tinder, and maybe she'd reappear later. I sent her a message, hoping to hear back from her soon. But hours passed with no response. I began to feel a gnawing sense of unease. Why would she disappear so suddenly? That night, as I lay in bed, my mind kept drifting back to Emily. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd just gotten busy or decided to take a break from social media. Still, something about it felt off. The connection we had seemed too real to just evaporate like that. I tried to push the worry aside and went to sleep, hoping that tomorrow would bring an explanation. But as I drifted off, a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The next day, my curiosity turned into obsession. Emily's sudden disappearance from Tinder and the lack of any online trace started to gnaw at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I spent hours scouring social media platforms, trying to find any hint of her existence. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air overnight. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe she had just decided to step away from the internet for a while, or perhaps she had simply lost interest. But that didn't explain why her profile had completely disappeared without a trace. I decided to visit the restaurant where we had our date, hoping maybe someone there would remember her or could provide some insight. The restaurant was quiet when I arrived, the evening crowd yet to filter in. I approached the host, trying to stay calm. "Hi, I was here a few nights ago, and I had a date with a girl named Emily. Do you remember her?" The host looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Sorry, sir, but I don't recall anyone by that name recently. We get a lot of people through here." I felt a chill run down my spine. How could no one remember her? The place was supposed to have a warm, intimate vibe. Surely someone would remember a beautiful woman like Emily. I left the restaurant, my anxiety growing. I couldn't understand why no one seemed to recall her. Back home, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from Emily, but all I received were notifications from other apps. Then, something odd happened. I received a new message on Tinder from a profile with no photo and no information, just a single message, *, remember me? *. My heart raced. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Was it a prank? My rational side told me it could be someone playing a cruel joke, but the coincidence was too unsettling. I replied, asking who it was, but there was no response. That night, as I lay in bed, trying to push my worries aside, I heard a faint noise, a soft buzz from my phone. I reached for it, expecting another notification, but there was nothing. The screen was dark. I shrugged it off as a glitch and tried to get some sleep. However, every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, her smile, her laugh, and the way she looked at me. It felt like she was watching me from somewhere, even though I knew that couldn't be possible. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of a message alert. I grabbed my phone, and to my surprise, there was another message from the same mysterious profile, *, you should have stayed away. *. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to dismiss it as an elaborate prank, but the unease remained. The fact that the profile had no picture, no details, and the way the message seemed to taunt me felt too personal. I looked around my dark room, the shadows seeming to grow longer and more ominous. Every creak of the house felt amplified, as if something was moving around me. Unable to sleep, I decided to check my phone again. This time, the screen was filled with notifications from Tinder, all from the same ghost profile. The messages were cryptic and unsettling. "I'm always watching, *, you can't escape. *. The fear I felt was primal, gnawing at my insides. I tried to tell myself it was just an elaborate prank, but the unsettling nature of the messages made me doubt my own sanity. I got up, pacing around my apartment, trying to calm myself. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was being watched. The shadows in my room seemed to move with every flicker of the streetlight outside my window. I knew I had to find out what was going on, but the creeping dread made me question whether I was ready to uncover the truth. I decided to dive deeper into my search, but as the days passed, the messages grew more frequent and disturbing. The sense of being watched was inescapable, and I began to question if I was still in control of my own mind. The line between reality and paranoia was blurring, and the ghostly presence seemed to be tightening its grip on me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would push me to the edge of sanity. I was deep into my investigation, my mind spinning with confusion and fear. The messages from the ghost profile were relentless and growing more sinister by the day. Each notification felt like a jab to my already frayed nerves. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I needed answers, and the more I dug, the darker the truth became. One evening, in a desperate bid to find out more about Emily, I stumbled upon an old article while scrolling through local news archives. The headline caught my eye. *, tragic accident claims young woman's life. *, the photo accompanying the article was of Emily. At least, it looked like her. The article detailed a car accident that had occurred 3 years ago, where a young woman had tragically died. It was as if someone had ripped a page from my own nightmare and put it into reality. I was paralyzed with shock. Emily had been dead for 3 years? It didn't make sense. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the implications. Had I somehow been catfished by someone using her identity? Or was this something more supernatural? Determined to get answers, I started tracing any clues related to the accident. I visited the area where it had occurred, hoping to find something that might shed light on the situation. It was a quiet, residential neighborhood, with an old house near the site of the crash. The house was dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. A chill ran down my spine as I approached the house. There was something eerie about it, an oppressive atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt drawn to it, as if there was something inside calling me. I hesitated but knew I had to check it out. I managed to pry open a loose board on one of the windows and slipped inside. The house was as abandoned as it looked from the outside, with dust covering every surface and cobwebs in the corners. But as I moved through the rooms, I noticed something strange. Old photographs scattered on the floor, some of them featuring Emily. They were not just any photos. They were personal, intimate shots of her and what seemed like friends or family. My heart pounded as I picked up one of the photos. In the background, I noticed a familiar detail, a pendant necklace that Emily had worn on our date. It was unmistakable. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. How could this necklace be here? Did someone have access to her personal belongings? As I continued exploring, I found a journal hidden beneath the floorboards. It was filled with handwritten notes and drawings, detailing a woman's obsession with someone who resembled Emily. The journal described how the woman believed she was being followed by someone or something, and how her life slowly unraveled into a nightmare. My hands trembled as I read the entries. It was as if the journal's author had lived through a similar terror that I was now experiencing. Suddenly, a noise startled me, a creaking sound coming from the direction of the basement. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier, and a sense of dread settled over me. I debated whether to investigate, but decided I had come too far to turn back now. I descended into the basement, the darkness swallowing me as I went. The air was colder here, and the shadows seemed to shift and dance. I found an old trunk in the corner, covered in dust. With trembling hands, I opened it, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. There were more photographs, more personal items, and a diary that seemed to belong to someone who had been obsessed with Emily's life, and now mine. As I flipped through the diary, I came across a chilling entry. Asterisk, I see them watching me. I know they're here, just like they were with Emily. I won't let them take me too. Asterisk, the final entry was a scribbled note. Asterisk, you're next. Asterisk, fear gripped me like a vice. I had unwittingly stumbled into something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The shadows in the basement seemed to close in on me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. I fled the house, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere and the feeling that I was not alone. Back in my apartment, the paranoia intensified. Every sound, every shadow, seemed to hold a hidden threat. The messages from the ghost profile continued, growing more insistent. I was trapped in a nightmare, with no idea how to escape or what was coming next. The line between reality and terror was blurring, and I was left wondering if I could survive whatever was lurking in the darkness, waiting for me. The days that followed were a blur of fear and paranoia. My once cozy apartment now felt like a prison, each creak of the floorboards and flicker of the lights amplifying my sense of dread. I could hardly sleep, constantly glancing over my shoulder, convinced that something was lurking just out of sight. The messages from the ghost profile kept coming, more frequent and more cryptic. They taunted me, playing on my fears and making me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Each message seemed to predict something that would happen soon, heightening my sense of impending doom. The worst part was that I could never trace the source of these messages. They came from an untraceable account with no details. One night, as I was pacing around my apartment, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and with everything that had been happening, I was on edge. I hesitated before peering through the peephole. To my surprise, there was no one there. I opened the door cautiously, but the hallway was empty. All that greeted me was a chilling breeze and an unsettling silence. I stepped out into the hallway, trying to calm my racing heart. I noticed something on the floor near my door, a small, black box. It had no markings or distinguishing features, and its appearance sent a shiver down my spine. I picked it up with trembling hands and carried it inside, my mind racing with dark possibilities. I opened the box slowly, revealing a stack of old photographs and a note. The photos were of Emily, some of them from the date we had, others from moments I hadn't seen before. My stomach churned as I saw more personal details about her life. The note, written in a shaky hand, read, Asterisk, you're getting closer to the truth. But will you survive it? Asterisk. I was horrified. The more I uncovered, the more I felt like I was entangled in a twisted game. The photos and note made it clear that someone, or something, had been watching me closely, manipulating the situation to terrorize me. Desperate for answers, I decided to visit the location where Emily's accident had occurred once more. Maybe there was something I had missed, something that could explain the bizarre events. This time, I was determined to investigate more thoroughly. Arriving at the scene, I saw the old house again. It loomed in the twilight, its presence almost menacing. I approached the house with a mix of determination and fear. I needed to find out why I was being targeted and what connection this house had to Emily's death. As I explored the house further, I discovered a hidden room behind a false wall in the basement. Inside, the room was filled with more photographs, journals, and disturbing artifacts, everything pointing to an obsession with Emily and a fixation on me. There were detailed notes about our conversations, our date, and even the messages I had received. It was clear that someone had been tracking my every move, weaving a web of terror around me. Among the items, I found a journal with a recent entry that struck me deeply. Asterisk, they're close to discovering everything. I have to protect the secret at all costs. If they find out, everything will be lost. Asterisk, the entry was signed with a name I didn't recognize. A name that meant nothing to me but was now etched into my mind as a potential clue. My fear turned into a desperate need to confront whoever was behind this. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As I left the house, the sense of being watched intensified. Shadows seemed to move with me, and the night air felt colder and more oppressive. Back at my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every noise, every movement outside my window, seemed to signal that someone was closing in on me. The once safe confines of my home now felt like a trap, and the shadows seemed to whisper dark threats. I knew I was running out of time. The only thing I was sure of was that the secrets buried in that house were about to be revealed, and whatever lay ahead would be more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The fear I had been living with for days reached a boiling point. My apartment felt like a cage, and every creak of the floor or rustle outside made my heart race. I knew I had to face whatever was haunting me and put an end to this nightmare. The discoveries I made in the hidden room of the abandoned house left me with one pressing question. Who was behind all this, and what did they want from me? The name from the journal, Lydia Hart, was my only lead. I started digging into it, finding little information online. The name seemed to belong to someone who had been reported missing a few years ago but was never found. The connection to Emily and the ghost profile was still unclear, but I had to follow the trail. One evening, driven by desperation and a need for closure, I decided to return to the abandoned house one final time. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was closing in on something crucial. As I approached the house, the darkness seemed to close in around me, and the wind howled, creating eerie whispers. Entering the house, I felt the oppressive atmosphere settle around me. The air was colder than before, and the shadows seemed thicker, almost as if they were alive. I made my way to the basement, where the hidden room had been. The place was exactly as I left it, but now it felt even more sinister. As I searched through the items again, hoping for a clue, I heard a noise behind me, a soft, deliberate step on the wooden stairs. I turned, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but saw nothing. My pulse quickened. Whoever was behind this was here with me. I continued searching, my anxiety mounting. Then I found a small, leather-bound book that I hadn't noticed before. It was old and worn, and as I opened it, I saw sketches and notes about Emily, the accident, and, most disturbingly, detailed plans about meeting me. The sketches were of various places I had been, including my apartment, marked with unsettling notes. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled with my flashlight, trying to turn it back on, but it was dead. The only illumination came from the faint glow of the moon through the broken windows. I heard footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. Panic surged through me. A figure emerged from the shadows, and I could barely make out a woman's silhouette. Her face was obscured by the darkness, but her presence was menacing. The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a gaunt face and hollow eyes. It was Lydia Hart. "You shouldn't have come here," she said in a voice that sent chills down my spine. "I warned you to stay away." I was frozen, unable to speak or move. Lydia's eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "Emily was supposed to be mine," she continued, her voice trembling. "She was my friend. When she died, I took her place, but I could never escape the shadows." I realized then that Lydia was a ghostly remnant of someone who had been consumed by her obsession. The entire situation was more supernatural than I could have ever imagined. Lydia had used Emily's identity to draw me into her web of terror. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," I managed to say, my voice shaky. "But I don't understand why you're doing this." "Because I was left behind," Lydia replied, her voice filled with anguish. "And now, you will understand the torment of being trapped between worlds." As she spoke, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. Shadows seemed to converge on Lydia, and her form began to flicker. The room was filled with a haunting wail, and I felt an overwhelming pressure in my chest. I had to escape, or I would be consumed by this nightmare. Summoning every ounce of courage, I fled from the house, stumbling through the darkened streets, my mind racing. I could feel Lydia's presence following me, the oppressive weight of her rage almost tangible. I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it. I leaned against the door, panting heavily. The messages from the ghost profile stopped abruptly, and the sense of being watched gradually faded. Lydia's terror seemed to have ended, and I was left with the chilling realization of what I had just experienced. I had faced something that defied all rational explanation and survived. In the weeks that followed, the hauntings ceased, but the memory of that night lingered. I moved away from the apartment, unable to stay in a place that had become a focal point of such dark events. The fear had transformed into a profound sense of relief, and while the scars of that night would remain, I knew I had escaped the clutches of a nightmare. The mystery of Emily, Lydia, and the ghost profile was something I would never fully understand. But as I left that city behind, I vowed to never forget the terror I faced, and to always be cautious of the shadows that might lurk in the corners of our lives.